Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Did we do it right?
Did we do it right this time? Are we live? Do we have sound? Did we actually succeed? For the first time ever, up top.
Shout out, do hard things.
Shout out to our tech team behind the scenes who got this all set up and tested, and we did test it last time as well, for the record, and we did. But this time we went with a little different setup. We're good to go.
Boom.
We don't want to celebrate too much about doing basic things correctly that we promised to do, but here we are. We're live. Hello, everybody. I'm Josh Welgus. You know me as Gilly in the comments and in the updates and so on and so forth. Who are you?
Josh Carlson.
What do you do
I
here?
work here.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Welcome to Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era Q&A Part 2. We are, how many days? We're roughly 3 years into this campaign, I believe.
Something like that.
Yeah. We have 10 days left. 10 days left, which means we've been live now on the campaign for something like 14 days, right? Yeah. 2 weeks. We're at about the 2-week mark since launch. We are breathing down, or I guess $3 million is breathing down our necks.
Yep.
We're not breathing down three.
Tonight, tomorrow, it'll be close. It'll be this evening, I think, is possible, but we usually see a pickup in the morning.
Right.
So it could be tomorrow morning, but that's awesome that we can even speak in that with that assurance. So.
Yeah, we've, again, a lot of people have looked at this campaign and been like, well, of course you were going to do $3 million. Like, of course you're going to unlock all these stretch goals. Like, oh, you were just holding back things that you planned to include the whole time. Again, we cannot be... You can choose not to believe us, I suppose. But like, we can't be any more transparent with you that we did not know what to expect from this campaign at all. We knew we were coming out of the gates with a really expensive game. The Skyrim adventure game, which was on GameFound last year, which by all accounts that I've read is a really great game. Did not do super well in its campaign, and so obviously we were watching that because we expected that, like you expected from us, we kind of expected that they'd show up and they'd pull in about $3 million just by virtue of having the Elder Scrolls license. We watched that campaign and we're like, oh, yikes! Like we don't know what to expect, and so we have been just being totally frank, like this. We're really, 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 really happy with where we're at on this campaign, and we just want to say thank you to all of you backers out there for your support and enthusiasm and your questions and your critiques and so on and so forth. So
the other thing that a lot of people if you're watching campaigns enough, you do probably see this a lot, but you'll have the massive day one. And that's anyone that follows the game is jumping in at that point and whatnot. But then I was very much expecting like a pretty steep fall off to, I don't know, what we have in previous campaigns. It's been 5,000-10,000 a day. And we've come in at a much higher clip throughout the campaign, which is awesome. That's what's kind of driving us this last 1 million. So
and then as we go into the final week, generally we see another uptick in enthusiasm. But if you haven't followed a lot of Chip Theory campaigns before, a few years back actually, we switched to mostly doing 10-day campaigns. So this is a 24-day campaign or 23-day campaign, depends on I think how you count the like half days that are involved, and we had actually planned to end the campaign at noon CDT a week from Friday. We found out yesterday that it's actually set to end at 7 o'clock p.m. Due to some multiple admins being logged into the GameFound account at the same time and sometimes not getting saved correctly. So anyway, whatever. But generally speaking, we like to do 10-day campaigns. One, it avoids this kind of slower grind in the middle of the campaign where things slow down significantly, but we still need to be like ever present in the comments and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it also just takes a lot less out of us as people to do a 10-day campaign instead. So this is the longest campaign I think we've done since Too Many Bones Undertow, if I'm not mistaken. So, anyway, There you go. But we're on the brink of $3 million.
Yes.
And at $3 million, we unlock the Thieves Trove. And you want to talk a little bit about the item cards and the Thieves Trove in general?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really exciting. This is something that Logan was deep into development as we started this process of kind of working through what types of things could we roll out as expansions, what types of things could we roll out along with this campaign, how far do we want to take it and how much do we want to release within the base game box. What can we afford to release? How big can this box get? All of those questions. And this was one that had kind of been set aside as a possible really good thing to delve into later. But as the campaign grew, it just became more and more clear that this is something we might want to bring forward faster. And so it has a flavor of kind of a crafting bent to it, mainly because of how we're labeling the groups of items. But it's not crafting. It's not something that we want you to get mired in too much. Like when the main system is, we have a lot of battles going on, a lot of combat going on. So we wanted to focus on what those items were doing, but how you use them. We didn't want to just throw a huge amount of loot into the game that didn't maybe differ from each other enough. And so in this way, we have these sets of items that we're unlocking slowly, but also not so slowly. Like when we're looking at what we're unlocking, it's this first group is 20 items and relics total. And and they work in a very specific way, which we've detailed out in the update. So I won't go into all of that, but they don't work just like your other items. There's a unique way of using, and then sometimes even refreshing the use of these items, and that will happen. You'll see as we go through this next strip of goals, we're going to find that the next set works differently than the first, and then maybe we have a third set planned if we continue on this track. Maybe. So again, as you pull those, you're going to look at them a little bit differently. You're going to say, well, this type of item affects my, my class and what it can do. It actually extends that. And in this case, I can maybe consume this and then somehow cook it again at the end of the day to ready it for my next day or my next battle. So lots of different ways to use these things, and I think you're going to find it interesting as we explain them more.
Yeah, absolutely. So that will be free for every backer.
Yes.
Once we hit 3 million, and it could grow. It could grow significantly, and obviously then the MSRP of it after the campaign will grow right alongside the content of that expansion. So that's exciting. Let's jump into a few of the questions that you all have.
Sounds good.
There's a few other things that I want to make sure we cover before we hand it off. And again, there is so session 2 of the gameplay with Salem and Andrew Chesney is coming up right after this Q&A. I know a lot of people are anxious to see how session 2 plays. And then in the next couple days, we are going to be filming an end game scenario for you as well, so that you can see how the end game works, and we're excited to show you that, even though it's a little spoilery because the end game is kind of like the big epic culmination, but we recognize we recognize that you want to see how it works so that you can kind of see how the entire game. I think that's been a challenge of this campaign, is kind of explaining to everybody how the whole thing coalesces into a singular campaign and how much replayability is involved and that kind of thing.
So like even rewind from there, like our previous campaigns, I mean, for the most part, if it wasn't Bones, which is like everything, out on the table, what you're getting and you can reference old games, but new titles and new IPs, we just, it's ideas, it's loose mechanics. Most of the time when we're coming to a campaign, that's what we're presenting, and
we are often criticized for that, fairly. But we also level our expectations about what we can do on any given campaign based on that. Yep. So like that's just how we roll. You guys know
and
that.
It is how Adam and I started. We started with early on in Kickstarter days, like 2 years after it came live, and it was just, hey, we have this idea, let's throw it out to the world and see if they want to back it, and we'll make it or we'll develop it. And I think others maybe fast forwarded that into more of a pre-order mechanism or mechanic of ordering early, and we stayed in the idea stage,
right.
Realm.
Yeah,
we're getting pushed further and further, and this game pushed us further just surely because of approvals.
Yeah, the license.
So
yeah.
it looks fairly presentable, but there's still a lot that needs to be balanced and tweaked. And what we have on the table right now is even months old. And so as approvals come in and as we get feedback on, this battle form we're just not allowed to use. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's rewind a couple things. Let's go back and reshift this. So there is a lot of balancing, and it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, they're asking a question on that. Yeah, that changed a long time ago. Like that. But that's sometimes the case. That's sometimes the reality. One of those things is like the classes, and that big change of not having that requirement and not having you achieve classes throughout your adventure, but literally picking them at the beginning and kind of sticking with that class throughout your sessions, because there was enough to do in the game to not have or be thinking about that element as well, and try to be planning out your classes that you'll upgrade to and meeting those objectives. So we pulled that out and it made it a lot smoother, but the cards still show those. And so that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, more. Right. There's more. We have more to say even on that, but I want to tackle a few of these questions. Okay. And I know this Q&A is probably going to be a little bit shorter than our launch day one, both because we successfully launched it without technical difficulties, and I know we don't have that launch day hype going on. But so first question: how many enemies are typically in the pull bags by the end of the game? Are the included bags big enough to hold all the chips when the bags are at their fullest? So the answer to that is we don't know yet, because we don't know how many enemies are in the game yet. Because
unlocking.
Excuse me, because you are still unlocking more. Yeah. Right now, the answer to that question is like all of them, like all of the baddies go into the 2 bags. Mm-hmm. We will make the bags larger if we need to, and if there's so many, especially once we unlock additional regions of the game and all that kind of thing. If we need to limit and we say hey, pull 50 or pull 25 or pull however many, we will address that as we get to that point. We just want there to be a huge variety of enemies in each bag, and so we will make them as big as we need to. And that means if they need to get bigger than the ones that we've already shown, we
just do that.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Is there anything planned in the game to help you track enemy turns? I've struggled with this in other games, particularly when there are a lot of enemies on the field.
Yeah, so we have objective tokens. The acrylic tokens that we'll be using. Some of the maps use those, but they're also fairly nondescript and can be used. In most cases, you're not fighting as many enemies as you would typically in like a dungeon delver of some kind, where you have just masses or waves of enemies coming at you. It's anywhere from 1 to 5 enemies in most battles, and some of the bigger mats, the clash mat, can go beyond that. But if you still want, so it's not typically a problem to track. If you still want to track it, we just throw one of those tokens on top after an enemy is moved, and that's a good way of tracking.
Yep. Are there any plans for a map expansion in the future, either cosmetic or functional? This is funny. We've seen there's been lots of people who have been like, can we upgrade the Neoprene stretch goal to make the maps Neoprene, or can we add a Neoprene upgrade? No. No, there's just not.
The bottom of the box is going to literally fall.
Right. Yeah. The both the cost benefit for it, frankly, just like isn't enough. And it does cost a lot.
Yes.
I know there's been you can There have
Make
been
everything
accusations
neoprene.
out there that that neoprene is like super cheap and super easy to add. And I just want to say, so like, there is a difference in quality in neoprene. Like, we could add really thin neoprene to this game.
You could fray the edges.
And we could fray the edges for you to make it feel more in-world, right?
Not care about the die cut.
Not care about the die cut. Have things more off-center,
yes,
etc. But like die-cut neoprene at 3 mm, which is what pretty much every piece of neoprene that we've ever done has been, other than I think the rooms in Burn Cycle, so that they stick better. So like, yeah, it's expensive, and offering that as an upgrade, like, ultimately just doesn't really benefit the game in any meaningful way whatsoever.
And that being the one that brokered a lot of those deals, like originally going to the manufacturers and being like, "Okay, we want to do this," and them saying no. Like, no, nope, you can't do that. It's not going to be consistent enough. You want these little tiny holes to line up in the centers of the, no. Are you okay with them moving by this kind of a variance? Then we can do it. And they will be frayed to an extent. And like, none of that worked for us. And so we worked really hard to, find the right manufacturer for it. But you pay for that. And we're definitely paying for that. So yeah, it's not a cheap piece to include in a game.
I would go so far as to say that the way, this is going to sound pretentious. The way we handle neoprene, we would almost consider like a trade secret that's very special to our company. There's a million different companies out there that can do mats and neoprene. We have a very specific one that we have stuck with for years because of the level of quality that we get specifically from them. And that's not just the die cut, that's not just the edge stitching, that's not just the thickness. The printing color vibrancy on our particular neoprene manufacturer is also like a clear cut above any other manufacturer that we found. So anyway, sorry, really long in the weeds way to say, like, no plans to upgrade the maps at this point. Both either in the game or as art wise, yes. Sorry,
but like, componentry wise, we've kind of settled in on like something that can be printed and appear very high resolution. Very easily read. The other challenge, and this is again, we don't have to get too, but like one of the things we started with is a very, very colorful map, and what we found was that it was actually not performing as well on what its main function was, which was to be a map that you could easily read the points you're headed to, how far away those points were. Like, the functional piece of this map was being kind of overtaken by beautiful art that would, like, your eyes were distracted by it, and then you're like, well, I can't see from there what we're trying to do or where we're trying to go. So we brought it back, knowing that we were going to need to address this in the future, but we brought it back to something more simple. And we actually like the simple better. So it's not that we're trying to just go back to something full color. That's not necessarily its purpose, but we'll find a middle ground, and we're listening. So,
and again, that's also the map piece of the game has been probably the thing that we've been back and forth with Bethesda and ZeniMax about the most, just because of they're very like conscious of what we can show of any given region, and we're like, well, we want to explore the whole region. They're like, yeah, but we've only explored this much of that region, so it's weird that we haven't shown it in our video game, and then you guys are wanting to add like things in your board game. Anyway, that's none of that was really a part of this question at all, but there you go. There's a big long soapbox about maps in general. Oh, I forgot that I have control of scrolling this. So all right, I like people's idea of creating environment chips for the map to give more random variety in the game. Is this something CTG may develop for the game?
So map or like
I think they're talking about like
delves.
obstacle chips a la like Undertow and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, like on the main map there are objective tokens that actually create different or function in different ways based on the region that you're in, and will create kind of some tension points on the map. But if we're talking about the clash mat or the delves and having it change up, we are doing certain things that you may not be seeing just yet with double layering on the mat, using our delve tiles in different ways. So yeah, there are things we're considering there, and then also you have objective or quest chips that will function in different ways. Persons you have to free, that kind of thing. But yeah, we're trying to use those in a lot of different ways so that each map, even a clash mat that doesn't change, does actually change on you using those things, creating ravines that you have to fire arrows over or whatever.
Yeah. What do the symbols on the bottom of the clash sheets mean? I believe those are relics of the time where you could switch classes and you needed to. So so I have one-handed combat here. I'll put it here, and I have the warrior class here, and you can see that these two symbols are the same. And so again, there were going to be requirements for switching classes so that you would essentially like achieve mastery of a single class, and that would allow you to upgrade and level it up. And that doesn't exist anymore. So
there was also a point, and again, some of this is trying to be just more helpful, and we're gauging how helpful it actually is. But like for destruction, it's showing that you're using magicka. So that was the main main purpose there, was this, that it's drawing from the magicka line or stat to use that skill line. So again, there's a lot of things to communicate here. It's like what battle form do you need to be in? It is a skill line, and what skill line it is. So that's destruction. So you have your red symbol for that, but then it's also using magicka in order to interact with and roll those dice. So there's a lot of different pieces that need to be communicated in different ways, and sometimes they can get in the way of other things when you're just looking at what do my dice do. So we're still kind of testing what and how it's helpful. But yeah, that was kind of where those things are, what those are doing.
These questions are shifting on me. Okay, as the top ones get deleted. There we go. Okay. Do towns have any mini games, mercenaries to hire, or any randomized elements besides shops? What makes one town different from another?
Yes, to all those things.
To all those things, yeah. The goal is, and you're only going to be seeing basic towns because again, we've been working primarily to get all of the mechanics of the game functioning and singing and approved by our license holders. So, but yes, the goal is to give every single town a unique flavor with potential NPCs you can talk to that you might even recognize from the video games, to little like bar games you might be able to play, that kind of thing. One of the things that's cool about do we have a gazetteer anywhere? I don't know if we have a gazetteer anywhere, and I don't know if we've shown this really on camera, and this could change. So like I want to be.
It will change.
Well, yeah, but I mean even the size of this might change.
Yeah.
But for example, and this is just so you're just going to see lorem ipsum here. But we probably can't even zoom out enough, so I should probably just hold it up like this actually. So this is like center. Okay.
There you go.
So, lay it flat. Okay, like this. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, so this is, and again, a lot of this is like
early version.
So like you're going to see lorem ipsum here, and there's going to be town square NA, but we've got in Too Many Bones. There were a lot of like interesting little mini games we tried to put into encounter cards, right? And anybody who's played Bones knows that sometimes those cards, trying to fit all these little rules for all these little things on these cards is almost impossible sometimes. Like we've had to scale back things that we wanted to do in Bones, or we've had to like remove entire ideas at points simply because we couldn't fit it. With something like the Gazetteer here, we can do kind of whatever we want with any landmark, towns, or again, like important landmarks in any given region that we're allowed to use. Yeah, I know. But like we can kind of do whatever we want which is really, really cool because there's space to handle it here. We can add a whole bunch of lore about that location so that you feel more transported into this world. We can have this big, beautiful scenery, art pieces that Anthony has been working diligently on over the last couple months. We can do town square actions, that kind of thing. There's just a ton of room, and we want to give every location in the game a significant flavor that really makes it feel like it has a sense of place within the world. So, I don't know.
No, that's true. It's definitely something where we want you to not be distracted by like figuring out the right towns to go to. So we want them to be a little bit more like you happen upon this because it's in the general direction that you're going. At least I did not want you to be like having to peruse and study every single town before you take a step in that region, worried that you're not going to the right place. Right. That said, each town, I do want them to feel very different. And so you'll have these things that are happening in the towns at this time period that will either engage with you or allow you to engage with it. Sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't in the matter. And when you visit, there will be those types of things in the city details, but then you'll also have this town square that there will be, right now it's just very, very, minimal things, but there would likely be multiple things that you can choose, your group members can choose to interact with. And that could include like fast traveling or traveling, like jumping on a ship if you're on the coast or something like that to get around faster. That would take a group action. You'd all have to kind of do that together, obviously, and then there's other things that you could do individually. But again, those would not be the same in any town. Like a lot of those things are meant to give the town some flavor. And then there's those things that we would hope you can count on, such as shops and a certain amount of like training access, stuff like that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, we don't want part of the game to be strategizing your route, really. It's more about giving every location a sense of interest and a sense of adventure and something unique and like exciting when you come across it, instead of like trying to min-max your travel planning.
Every single
because we don't want you to have to hire a travel agent to play this game. So there you go.
Right.
Okay. Are there any more surprises coming in the form of add-ons or expansions? No.
No more.
There is not. Just point blank. No, there's not. The Thieves Trove is kind of like that's what we're heading down the home stretch with. So now the size of the Thieves Trove in its final iteration that we are giving with every pledge, again, that will be determined by funding. And again, let me just be absolutely clear. I know if we added a whatever pack at this point of, upgraded anything. We know that if we added another little expansion or another region expansion, we could certainly juice the funding numbers, and but there are limits to what we can do financially on this campaign. There are also limits to what we can get done by the promised delivery date, and that is even more important on this campaign than it's ever been on a previous campaign because of the amount of languages that are being offered. So we have to get the English done as soon as we can, so that we can hand that off to our translation partners and they can subsequently get their translations done, so that we can get this out the door by end of next year. There's
also just the aspect of what is good for the game,
right?
Some might make the assumption that just more of anything is just better, and that's there comes a point when that's not true.
Right.
So we've looked really hard at what that could be, what we're willing for it to be, but surprises, again, the price point we're well aware of, and I don't want to create add-ons for the sake of creating add-ons for those numbers. It's the things that are making sense. The regions are extremely exciting. As far as the amount of content, we still have more unlocks for Valenwood. I did post a couple more stretch goals just before live.
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention that.
So that's a thing. Again, these are stretch goals that are they're spaced further out, kind of on purpose, not for, obviously right now I would love to have a whole bunch of, a lot more little goals to kind of help along through the middle of this campaign. We've blown through all of that. We're into, final stretch goals, at least up to 3.15. But there were some big things that we had set aside, and I'm kind of revealing those now, at least up to a level, I think 3.5 is what we're showing. There are a few beyond that too. These were things we weren't sure if they were going to show up in expansions or if we're going to do other things in expansions, and like there's been a lot of good suggestions in the comments, so we're taking those into account. There's some cool things with, you know, I don't know. There's a lot we can do. I want to say stuff, but I can't.
And so this is always a trick too, because like the worst feeling is showing something really, really cool at a certain benchmark. And again, for us at this point, these are stretches. Like these are things that like are not made yet.
Look at those goals and you'll see a blank class sheet that has a title of the thing we're gonna make. But...
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway, but yeah.
But nothing feels worse than like showing something and people getting really, really excited about it, and then like coming up, you know, whatever, $75,000 short of it, and then like, you know, and then we don't necessarily feel great about like throwing it in just as like when it doesn't even get close. So we just have to be careful. We have a ton, you know, people keep asking us, do you plan to add this in the future, to do this in the future? Like we have a lot of great ideas. we want this to be
a lot of bad ones too.
Yeah, exactly. But... Yeah, we want this to be a home run franchise moving forward, and we do want to release more expansions for it in the future. Absolutely. Like yes. But we just have to be careful about what we can do this first go around. So you know that there's been a lot of questions about vampires and werewolves, and like that's
what I was gonna say. I held back.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying we want to do that at some point. We want to do that at some point, but we have to be just there's you know there's limitations in what we can do, and we have to be careful about what we dangle out there as a carrot and then need to take away from you. So anyway, okay, how many different dice does each class have?
So classes don't have dice. You'd probably be in skill lines. I would assume. Yes. The skill lines, for the most part, I think they're locked in and don't vary. They're again, this is one of those questions that has different answers depending on when you ask it. So like, and it's in flux. It again in a half an hour. It will be more than 10. But they have had 8 different dice for that class. They have had 10. Some of the classes where they're like the damage classes, or the ones that are clearly, you know, able to dispense of enemies versus like crowd control abilities. We were contemplating having more, just imagining that more people would be going into those, but we've pulled back from that, I think, now at this point. So it is a number that is in flux, but 8 to 10 is kind of where it's been.
Yeah.
So.
Did I skip one? No, I did not. Okay. How can you? I can read. I'm tired. It's been a long couple weeks. I apologize. Can you give us some more details regarding the deluxe playmat and art book that will help us make our decision on whether or not to go all in? Lots of people on the playmats. So the art book is going to be a really, really cool jam-packed art book with pretty much all the art from this entire game. And this game has more art in it than any game we have ever done, and I think by a relatively significant margin. Especially when you factor in the fact that the enemies in this game are all dual-sided.
Right.
So, you know, there's something like 60-something enemy chips at this point. Every single one has 2 different enemies on it. Right. So so the art book, and again, we can't commit to anything lore wise because Bethesda has a contract with another company that handles their specific lore books. ZeniMax, sorry. So we are not sure what we can do beyond art. So all we're promising right now is it's going to be a really great art book with all these illustrations that, you know, normally you only see on a tiny little chip. You're going to see big, full color, full resolution versions of them. Yep. The playmat, we always hesitate. We get this question with every campaign. Because the game is still in development, We don't want to show anything too detailed on the playmat because it is subject to change.
Right.
That said,
I masterfully folded the mat over and obscured it as much as I could because like what can you show? I'd love to show the whole thing, but then that becomes ingrained in people's minds and it's like, oh well, this is going to be here and this is going to be here, and it's like,
and then you adjust the art a little bit and you offend somebody who is like, I really liked the original art that you hastily photoshopped on there.
Like we have to deal in broad strokes at this point, and that's just the thing about a campaign. And that's, yes, one side is going to have outlines and help you know where things are going on the board. The other side is going to be more art and free form
that you could use theoretically for any fantasy game, or any game that happens in the. And I get
that might not be like that might not be enough to pull the trigger on it. Like that's just a reality we have to deal with.
I will say again, we talked about Neoprene earlier in the stream. They are thick 3mm Neoprene mats with beautiful edge stitching. Every time we sell them, we are always amazed at how many people are really, really excited about them and use them for every game in their collection. So they are really, really nice mats. It's hard to show many specifics, but I don't know. We can talk about whether it's possible to even put together like a small example just to. Lots of people are asking about it. We're not asking you to make a final decision on it. We want to show more eventually is kind of what I'm trying to say. So like we understand we're asking you to make a decision on something that is not yet fully formed. It's the nature of running campaigns. Yeah. Can you tell us anything about the potential future crafting expansion? Well, so the Thieves Trove. So okay, this is a tricky thing. Crafting in board games, if the entire game is not kind of built around the concept of crafting, is a hard thing to shoehorn in. Without a massive amount of like additional rules overhead and componentry and that kind of thing. So,
and just downtime in the game.
Yes, correct. That too. Yeah. And, there's so many decisions to make in this game at every stage that it just, the last several months, I'll say it this way. The last several months, we've been spending a lot of time stripping things out of the game, not because they weren't cool, not because they didn't work in a vacuum. Lots of things worked really, really well in a vacuum. It's like, oh, we got this cool system. We'll put that system here, and we'll put this system here, and then we'll put crafting up here. And it just like it starts to be too much, and especially when we're working with a license, and we're probably going to have a lot of Elder Scrolls fans coming to this that maybe haven't played a board game quite this immense before. We really we want to streamline wherever we can. So crafting for now, I'm not going to say we're never going to do crafting in the future or anything like that, but crafting for now is kind of the Thieves Trove expansion, and then
well, and it could manifest itself potentially in class cards. Like we might take it that direction, having a class that represents crafting type, but like again, how does that relate meaningfully to battle is the question. It will likely relate to your item sets or items that you are collecting, items and relics. But again, that's just a very loose possibility that we could take what remains. Again, that merged with a bunch of these items that we're unlocking was the extent of what we were comfortable with. And was the closest thing to a crafting expansion that we were good with. Again, like when we first came out with this stuff, you have too much in the game when you're like, okay, crafting, let's get up over at this table. We've got crafting set up. So yeah, it's just
you have to build a literal crafting station in your game room in order to craft in this game. Very realistic, very immersive.
But I would just say there are other priority possibilities for expansions that I think are going to be way more interesting and in line with what you're doing in the game, than taking crafting much beyond what we've just spoken about.
Yeah, part of making a great game, board game is leaning into what that game is good at. So, we used we talked about like the Skyrim adventure game earlier. The Skyrim adventure game leans heavily into the adventure like going places and exploring part of what makes Elder Scrolls games really cool.
Yep.
We are leaning into combat and character customization, and that's not to say there's not a ton of other things in the game. There is, but that is what this is best at. That's what these systems do best.
Yep.
That's what this set of componentry does best. And so everything that we are adding to the game, we are filtering kind of through a combat first lens, because that's where the interest really lies.
Even like the exploration aspect manifests itself most in delves, where there is exploration, but it's in the midst of battle.
Right.
So
yeah. Which gives me a chance to also just address one other, and we've talked about this in updates already, because one of the critiques, of watching the playthroughs so far has been that the enemies seem too easy to dispatch. They don't act enough. I want to talk about that so that you can see my face and hear the nuance. We are absolutely going to make sure that the enemies are threatening and mean and nasty, and a mud crab may kill you at some point. We're committed to that. So I worked on the first pass of enemies in the game, and I gave them a ton of armor. A ton of armor. They were averaging about 2.5 points of armor per enemy. Now, I am also the person behind the initial Cloudspire solo scenario, Ignition, just so that you have a idea of where
Some are laughing about that right now.
I know. Yeah, that's an inside if you played Cloudspire. It's just it's the first scenario in the game, and it's notoriously difficult right out of the gate. Which, again, my mindset there was like, well, you only get 4 scenarios with the Brahmin. So every single one better yeah, exactly.
Right
that gives you an idea of where my development sensibilities lie. We have stripped that back significantly because in the early going, especially, we were finding that it's really hard to get through 2 points of armor reliably in the early game. And so that layer, we nerfed armor massively for this demo kit because it was just too much. And we've said we've said this in updates as well, but we're gonna be balancing that. A huge part of what's going on is there's a lot of things we need to balance here across skill lines, across enemies, across everything. Because the other thing that we're finding is it's just more fun to have skill lines that do really fun, explosive, exciting things. And so skill lines have also, been experiencing maybe a little bit of power creep. And so we've got to fold all that together. I didn't want to sit here and say combat is what this game does best, and have everybody sitting at home being like, well, the combat looks too easy.
We're looking at a lot more skills for enemies that kind of cause you pause when you're engaging with them, not because that you can't just blow through that enemy, but there's some barriers in the way. Some enemies you have to be adjacent to before you could do that. Some enemies might just straight up resist that first attack. So there's things like that we're looking at, rather than boost that armor, or because these enemies have to do 2 things. There's 2 different modes, 3, but 2 and then a hybrid between the 2. And one, we can focus on 20s just being straight up nasty. And you're going to face those in clashes. But when you're in a delve, which is I think what people are probably the most critical of, is when you reveal that delve tile and a couple lobies come out and you just decimate them, that's well, that wasn't tough. Well, the delve isn't necessarily about creating massively hard opposition in every tile turn. It is about getting through a delve before fatigue overwhelms you and you run out of time. But there are still those times where you're going to flip over a tile and it's going to throw down some 20s, and you have to turn around or assess really hard whether you want to continue.
Right.
But again, delves are doing a little bit different thing. We're trying to give you the lower tier enemies a little bit more often, because we know that's not your only objective. Whereas on the Clash mat, that is your only objective: eliminate everything. So they're doing different things. And I just want that to be known as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We're trying to, we've talked about this, even the question of why 3 different types of battles, why, and really what we're trying to do is we're trying to lean into the feeling of all three of these types of encounters that you would come across in the video games. You know what I mean? You do come across just like enemies out there on the field, and you just got to take care of them. You just got to whip them into shape. In delves, you are often trying to just get through the delve, and you do often run from high level enemies in delves because you're just trying to kind of get to where your objective is and get what you need to and get out. And so often you run into a dungeon where you're vastly under-leveled for what's happening in there, and it is more a game of escape than it is a game of hardcore tactical combat. And then this all culminates in these dungeons that have a fixed difficulty level attached to them, where we have a rough idea of what kind of experience we're expecting you to have, and we are designing specifically to that. And so again, that almost becomes more of a I know how the end game scenario that they're going to show works to a degree, and it's almost like a Cloudspire scenario in terms of it's the amount of intricacy that's happening and the amount of various things that you have to try and keep in mind with your character, because there's so much going on. So we're trying to, and that simulates those epic boss battles that you encounter in adventure games, where it's oh my gosh, this is overwhelming and this is really hard, and I better be prepared when I go into any of these. One
thing I think we've managed to do quite well that I've been very pleased with, that we were able to get there, with Delve specifically, is just the feeling when I play ESO. Actually, one of my favorite places to be is in a dungeon that I shouldn't be in, because it's just stronger than I am.
Right.
And trying to figure out the pathings of the enemies so that you can slip by and that you can get that thing, or you can get the Sky Shard, or whatever it is, you can get there, but you're not supposed to be there yet, or you're supposed to be there with friends and you're not. And so it has a feel of that. There is a lot of discussion when you're in this of we could just blow by these. We're going to set a massive, train here coming, but how do we do this and get out? And that's kind of fun. It's not.
I think actually Alex Radcliffe and Meg, Professor Meg, when they were here demoing the game, I believe Meg was we're just going to sprint. That's just our whole thing. We're just going to sprint. And I think they actually made it to the end of a delve in session 1, which is very rare.
Very hard.
It's very rare. And so, again, we're trying to open up more strategies. And again, movement is an important part of the game as well. It's not just about sitting next to somebody and
very different than Bones in that
hitting
way.
Back and forth. Okay. All right. So I'm going to try and blow through a couple of these without extensive answers.
I will not talk then.
No, it's fine. Will there be companions, pet summons aside from just items? Will they have their own chips to control and use tactically in combat? I don't think we have anything specifically planned right now, but that's certainly something that I think could be easily added as we get further into development or in a future expansion or that kind of thing. That's accurate.
Yeah. Again, we've talked about conjuration and a couple of the other possible things that would have you summoning something. That is a thing.
Yep. Are there item slot restrictions, or can a character wear, for example, 4 different helmets at once? Right now, beyond just the 4 slots restriction, we don't have any specific types of things. Some items do require you to be in a specific combat form, though, so that would be kind of, I guess that would be similar to what you're kind of asking is can I use this item in every scenario? We may look at things like that, any particular piece of gear may end up with an icon on it, so you can't wear 4 sets of armor or that kind of thing. I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where it's yes, I understand what the question is getting at. That's dumb. You would never wear 4 helmets in a game. Again, there's some of those there's some of that suspension of disbelief that is required to just make mechanics smooth and not add 100 different rules exceptions to things. But we'll obviously be looking at all that kind of stuff. One of the things that the Thieves Trove especially may just force us to do is get more specific about how all types of items work. Every item may end up with a type icon on it. And
we have keywords below the items already, and that's weapon, sword, legendary. So that kind of a thing will easily be rulable, if we need it to be. And say only 1 X equipped at a time.
Right. Are there any types, any enemy types that can move further than 2 hexes?
Yes, any enemy with rush can move further than 2. So there may also be other skills that would trigger further movement, but that's the main way, is that if they aren't adjacent to an opposition after their move, they'll move again. So that's kind of how we're handling that. Again, this is one of those things, like, how do you streamline? It's really nice to be able to know how enemies, like the distance enemies move, and so like handling it within a skill makes a lot of sense for this, and has been. It's like, okay, well, that one, that one's we can't forget that that's gonna move twice,
right?
And yeah, people have liked that a lot.
What might you have to show for this game at Gen Con this year? It will likely be this demo kit with a lot of updates to it, is probably what, like, you know, a much more filled in, robust gazetteer for Black Marsh, updated classes that, you know, that are more reflective of where the game's at now, updated and balanced skill lines, updated and balanced baddies, all that kind of thing. Enemies, sorry, they're not baddies in this game. Yeah, so, but it will likely be primarily this demo kit, but we'll be showing it to the public instead of having private demos for content creators, which is what we've been doing for the last couple months instead. But yeah, this demo kit has already seen a lot of, and I think even, I think Salem's going to mention this when they go into session 2. I think a couple enemies have already been buffed in what they're going to be drawing from in session 2, potentially. A couple other things have changed. It's funny to say this is outdated when we just started showing it, but like that's how fast the game changes when you're in active development. Is it's, you know, things are changing daily, and so we're 2 months past the date that I think we got this demo kit sent to us from our manufacturer. So there's a lot of things already, and you got to decide how much of that do you show on camera when it's not on the components, and you know, we're talking through all that kind of stuff. So
what's the significance of the enemy type symbols on the chips? For example, some of them have horns. So this is on the left side of the chip, and it's designating like whether it's a beast or a Daedric or like humanoid. And that's just another thing, kind of like the reference or the words under the item titles. It's another way for us to offer side quests that point you to a very specific type of enemy, questing, all of that kind of stuff.
Items that affect.
So that's kind of the main purpose of that. There may even be enemy skills that relate to that typing as well.
Yeah. Any chance of alloy dice being added as a possible stretch goal? You do not, I promise. If you don't want to pay for a $195 board game, you certainly do not want to pay for a $1,000 set of dice for this game. No. There was a question I answered in the comments actually earlier this morning too, asking about like the heat transfer printed dice versus etched dice. We would need to probably like double or triple the amount of backers to even start looking at the etched dice solution for a game of this scope with this many dice, because every single custom die would need its own mold, and those cost a lot of money. Also, our iconography right now anyway does not easily really work with the solution. So
probably for me the answer is more that second one, is just straight up the fact that when we're trying to put multiple numbers on that die and an icon that means something, potentially even another icon, like these have 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of information on them that need to be conveyed. It's just not possible with the etched. You know, you lose so much that ability to have fine detail in etched. One other note is heat transfer is when done correctly, is like one of the most resilient and like strong ways to. This is not a dot matrix process where you actually print on the die. That is a lot lower res. These are all film-based pieces that have their graphics prepared on this clear acetate, and then those the dice come in. Those are hovered above the dice, and then heat is what transfers them to being the heat transfer. But like it's a really good way to get high resolution and something that stays good for a long time.
Yep.
So
yep. Will there be skill lines which are not focused on combat? If yes, how do they work?
You want to answer that?
No.
So, go up again.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Skill lines not focused on combat. We have a few. I mean, there's definitely some that we'll be talking more about as we get them approved and developed. But yes, there are classes as well. There's a lot of things that are you can spend. There's a fair amount of classes that have abilities that you can spend your tenacity on in town or whatnot. But yeah, I would say they're minimally there. It's not like we have huge lines that can do a lot of stuff outside of combat, but there are a few.
Yeah. And again, we're leaning into what the game is best at.
Yep.
With that, that's really what it boils down to. But as we develop all the towns and all the town actions in more robust way, I love the word robust.
Use it 3 more times in the next.
I will attempt to.
Yeah.
We'll be seeing what else we can add in terms of like interesting things you can do with skill lines in towns and that kind of thing. For those in Brazil and other regions that are being fulfilled by your language partners, will ordering the products in your catalog be possible and also fulfilled by them? Ordering them in English, I believe. This is not etched in stone, but what I've heard from our logistics folks is that yes, that should be possible in most regions. As long as you're comfortable ordering the English edition, we should be able to get those products to our partners that are fulfilling in those areas that can also then disperse them to I know we have not sold games in Brazil for many years due to just the cost of importing and not having an effective partner on the ground there.
And the unknowns of being able to
get it I think that will be possible. Again, don't quote me on that, but I believe so. We'll make sure that that's really clear before we open the pledge manager and kind of open the floodgates on all that kind of stuff. Any thoughts at all at some form of competitive play in a future expansion? Not talking PvP specifically, but like individual goals, that kind of thing, semi-co-op situation. We're very competitive people, believe it or not. We primarily make cooperative games. We love the idea of all that stuff. I wouldn't say we have any plans for it necessarily. We do love those ideas. It's really hard to balance with a game that's this custom and has this many options. Like it's really hard to balance. And
I don't know if it's something like, again, the focus on what it does best is probably there in this answer. But like with Bones, I was so sure that like competitive play gear locks where you could fight in an arena of some sort was going to be a thing that people really liked or wanted. When we floated it with a couple of those encounters, we have an encounter or two. It wasn't as like jumped on as I thought it would be. And like we can always revisit things, but like it's a good question. I'm just not sure how much it would be sought after, even if we came up with an idea. So
when will external playtesting start? Soon. That's the best answer I can give you. We delayed it a little bit just because there were a few things, again, maps and things of that nature that were influxed with Bethesda and ZeniMax that we wanted to make sure we had like locked down, and then we ran headlong into the campaign. And so we just like managing playtesting takes a lot, especially on a game of this scope. And so until we kind of get through this campaign, then we will sit down and we'll take a look at when we can begin that. We want to begin it as soon as possible though, because there's lots and lots of things to balance and get feedback on and that kind of thing. So what are your plans with the loot system, mostly in regards to its run and loot mechanics? I think what this question is getting at. So there's been lots of talk in the comments about people not liking that you just like hop onto a treasure chest and lockpick in the middle of battle and it doesn't cost you anything. We're still playing with all of that. So that's plans are to make it fun. The plans are to make it fun, feel thematic, but also give you lots of action or lots of options and that sort of thing. The entire action economy of the game, actually, between moving and attacking and rolling and how and all that stuff interacts, we're still looking at that, and that may still change a little bit. in terms of how much fatigue does X cost you and how many things can you do on a single turn. We want to give you lots of options. We also want to streamline it. We also want to make everything feel consequential. We also don't want you to wait 10 minutes between turns. All of that is really going to come out in playtesting as we see exactly where the balance and all of those things lies. So
I will say that in watching a lot of the plays that we've done in-house here, it's a go-to strategy that people have really liked, is the fact that you can, if you're not necessarily equipped for the battle the way you want to be, or to take down an enemy, to have that other possibility of, I could run past that enemy and loot that chest with the possibility of getting something that could help us win this, has actually brought out some really cool endings to those battles, like instrumental draws, stuff like that, or just creative thinking in that regard. And the fact that it does take fatigue to do it, like you are committing to this instead of that, and so it has a real feel to it that's consequential. And like I remember the first two playtests with Michael that I was doing, I was like, this loot, we should just grab that. Like, we've got time, the rounds, it's not gonna, and then it undid us. Like, it was our undoing. We lost the battle because I was over here, tinkering with the lock when he was getting, decimated, and I died from fatigue. So it's like, it's just it adds a really fun element that isn't so. I don't think that it actually lines up very well with how I feel when I'm trying to loot items, even in ESO. I would say, and then you get interrupted by an enemy, and like it's So yeah, it's there. I really like how it's playing right now. But.
All right, so you start gaining over fatigue after 6 rounds of combat, making that kind of a soft cap to combat length. How did you arrive at that number of turns? How much real-world time is that usually? Do you think the timer, 6 rounds till fatigue, is necessary for delves? And is the timer still a thing in dungeons?
I've got answers.
Like I said, we're gonna fly through all these questions really fast. Here's
6 rounds 12. Is roughly 6 hours. No, I don't have an answer for that first question. It is definitely a parcel of time. And yes, it's very important for delves, especially because the delve is doing something different than a clash. Usually with clashes, you're not really worried about that timer, but a delve you are. We wanted that in there to make that feel different. Dungeons also will have it, but there are key points within a dungeon where that timer resets. Also, there are classes that can reduce that timer. So there are things or abilities. I should say there's definitely not necessarily a specific class, but there are abilities within classes that will affect that round.
And similarly deal with over fatigue.
Right. Basically that.
Yeah.
Basically that. Yeah. Dealing with over fatigue.
6 rounds, I mean, part of it is it's a D6 that's tracking it, so like that was convenient, but also it's a feel thing. Like so much of developing games is like a feel thing. It's like, oh, we try it, that doesn't quite feel right.
Right.
And you make one little change and it's like, and 6 rounds, I mean, so that's been around since like the fatigue rounds has been around since the days of Hoplo.
Yep.
But in Bones, it's like it's just kind of a thing. Like after about 6 rounds, it's like, okay, we gotta we gotta speed this up. Like otherwise, it becomes again just like too much of a endless tactical situation. All right. In what ways do classes feel different from each other? That's like.
Can't answer that.
It's really long. Yeah, I mean it's everything from being able to deal with fatigue to attack to giving to buffing your allies. I mean the goal is to really make them as consequential or more consequential in a lot of cases than even a skill line. And everything you do with your class is reliable, generally speaking.
Right. You have an innate that you can count on. You know what that's about. Right. You don't have to roll a die to queue it up.
Right.
So reliable is a good.
Yeah. But there's the classes interact with every single mechanic in the entire game in a variety of ways, and it's gonna be better just to like show the various classes as they come to fruition in development than to try and answer that in a quick statement. Yeah.
Yep.
Seeing the unlocked numbers around the shop, can you steal from the shop?
You can. You can in certain towns. Maybe not all of them.
Yeah.
But
yep.
yeah.
What table size do you think this game will require for a party for a large one? So this game is just full stop. This game is a little bit of a table hog. We're attempting to make the playmat that so the dimensions on that playmat. If your table can accommodate that, you should be able to accommodate the game. But again, especially with the amount of cards, and actually, interesting. I have an announcement. Even with the amount of cards, so like each player area needs to be relatively large just to accommodate that. Because as you unlock more skills, if you want to be able to look at them, you need more space. Been a lot of talk about enemy skill sheets and how people want more of them. I am announcing right now, we're going to do this in the update whenever the Thieves Trove unlocks, but we are going to include an extra one in every game. So there will be 2 of these enemy skill sheets in every game. We are not doing 4 simply because, number one, only the player whose turn it is really needs to be deeply reading what's on the map in terms of the enemy skill sheets. But also, again, there's so many reference cards on the table already that, especially if we need to give you a turn order reference card, which may need to come to fruition at some point when we get a little bit further, having a bunch of these also floating around the table, there starts to be a point where there's nowhere to put it, and so just from an economy of space. But there will be 2 of these, 2 enemy skill sheets in every game. We're announcing that in the next update, either today or tomorrow. You complained. And we are listening to that complaint because we think it's a totally valid complaint.
Yep.
So there you go. Okay, could you talk a bit about the encounter and enemy variety and what makes enemies different from each other, given that many of the stretch goals are enemies and encounters? That's a really long discussion. So here's what I would say. One of the biggest criticisms of Too Many Bones, our most popular game, is that the battle mat is too small and doesn't allow enough movement. We have designed now something like 350 or 400 encounters, most of them with multiple choices on them.
Right.
And I don't want to say that every single one is entirely unique. But we have prided ourselves on making every single one do something different and twist the mechanics of the game in a unique way. In this game, we have a lot more variables to play with. We have a lot larger mat to play with. And we have a much wider variety of enemies in the base game anyway to play with. And, the easiest way to explain, I mean, a lot of times it's simple stuff. Like in this battle, you're starting in the over fatigue round. That's probably unbalanced in this game, so we're not putting that in this game. That's not an unadvertised encounter that I'm talking about. But that's an example. That's you twist that one little thing, and suddenly the entire flavor of that battle changes entirely, and it's much more scary. So the theme of that would be we've been traveling for an extra day and we ate some food and we're all food poisoned and now we're all dying. That's an example. The enemy variety really comes down to the skills that they have. And again, we've got a 2-sided sheet here that has a variety of things, everything from maybe not being able to be damaged by your class, or needing to be damaged while you're adjacent to it, or only everybody's favorite skill, which I believe is called, what's it called in this one? What's the Hardy equivalent in this game? I can't remember. I should find it. It's escaping me. Robust, I believe. I can't find it. It's on here. Only being able to take 1 point of damage per turn, that kind of thing. Or needing to be attacked with proficiency dice instead of skill dice. Or only being able to be damaged by skill dice. Or there's a million different things that we do with enemies and their skills that make them, you really need to take a completely different strategic approach to them. And then you combine that, you layer that on top of whatever the encounter or the clash is doing that is also unique. And it creates all these really, really interesting tactical scenarios where you can never approach the same clash, or that you can never approach. Well, that's true as well. You can never approach any clash the same way. You always need to take a little bit different approach based on what's happening in it. And because of the random enemy draw, oftentimes even the same clash will have an entirely different flavor based on the enemies that get pulled out of that bag. And we had been play testing this demo quite a bit prior to going and demoing the game for others, but it was really fun watching other players draw that same clash but getting a completely different enemy pull and having to watch them completely change the strategy that we used when we were playtesting it. So anyway,
the stadium seating for Victorum is fantastic for the ease of saving the game. Can we hope that Elder Scrolls will have an insert that makes just as easy to save this game? I mean, we have our game save trays. They're again, because of table space, we're not trying to do anything with them on the table while you're playing. That was a very intentional thing that we did with Victorum. To make you feel like you were, the stadium seating was facing you and you were in the midst of it. But this has its own feel for that. So I mean, you lift up your mat with all the dice. The dice stay in there. The pegs stay in there. You put it in your clear tray that has a bottom and then a snappable top. But you lay in your cards on top of that, and your character is saved. You snap a top on, and then it stacks in a set of 4. They're all separate tops now, so they all kind of stay. They don't have to nest. I mean, it's a pretty convenient way to do that. And we're still prototyping, the perfect mold for that. But
this is like a job interview question. This is really interesting. Okay, in your opinion, what is the weakest point of this game right now?
I like it.
That you are excited to refine. Well, potential backer, I find that this game is perhaps a little too passionate. And sometimes because of that, it gets a little unfocused. No, I'm just kidding. This goes to, I feel like I've repeated this a lot, both in our Discord and in the comments and even here on camera. I think what we have been feeling for the last several months, honestly, after working on this for as long as we did and adding as many things in here, for me, it's really just been it's streamlining. Really. And I think we're to a really, really good point already on it, but that's really been that, there's so many cool things in the Elder Scrolls. So many cool things, because you can do anything, right? You can be anything, you can, or anybody, or whatever you want to say. So really getting it to the point where it's a smooth system. And we've been learning that as game developers too over the past several years. Some would argue not well enough, but getting things more streamlined, more smooth, that kind of thing. I don't know that there's any. I mean, everything needs more meat on the bones right now. Simply because we've worked really, really hard to get the structure of the game up and running. So I'm just, in terms of what I'm excited to refine, more than refine, I'm excited to just get more meat on every aspect of the game and watch all these systems start to really expand in interesting ways now that structure is pretty firmly in place for the most part.
I would say very, very similar. I would say the speed of play, improving on that. I think that's a weak point right now, is just it's finding that really that right line of where a battle feels intense and is fun and then it ends, versus it goes on 2 rounds too long. It becomes arduous because of X, Y, or Z. So we're trying to dial that in, which speaks to refinement. And same answer.
Any plans to bring your games to the digital world? We have had conversations. Nothing in the works right now. We have had conversations. We would love to. Our games are obviously heavily inspired by the digital games that we've played for years. So nothing in the works right now. But we have had conversations with a few companies. This is a weird analogy to draw, but it's sort of similar to the conversations we have about CTG apparel, where when we have a standard that we put out on the tabletop in terms of components and quality and all that kind of thing, if we ever sell apparel, That clothing also, like, it's like
better be the best
it better be
t-shirt
really,
you ever
really nice
wear.
clothing, or it's like it betrays the brand, right?
Yeah.
So in a similar way, we would only ever work with a digital partner that we felt was putting out really, really, really top-notch work. One of the challenges for us is just that, like, we don't sell as many copies of games as, you know, some of the larger, more mainstream companies that are making, you know, $50 games that like everyone is going out and buying.
Yeah.
And so the appeal of putting in a ton of effort to create a digital version of some of our stuff, not every company is super excited about that because we're not mainstream, at least not yet.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's one of the things.
Yep.
If I am getting the all-in bundle, is there anything I am not getting? You are not getting charged for shipping.
Nice. I was trying to think of a snappy comeback. I couldn't do it.
No, you are getting everything. You're getting everything, including the blacksmith pack. So I will say, this will also be in an update when we unlock the Thieves Trove. We can't add the blacksmith pack to your all-in package automatically, and we will not be able to add the Thieves Trove to everybody's pledge automatically until after the campaign. You do not need to take any action if you're not seeing that in your pledge right now, just like everybody will not need to take any action to see the Thieves Trove or to receive the Thieves Trove. You won't see it, though, until you get to the pledge manager level because we're going to add it on the back end afterwards because it's something that we created mid-campaign and added to a bundle mid-campaign.
Just the way GameFound works.
Yep. How will you manage true solo play with classes that have abilities that affect teammates? We will make sure every ability can work solo. That's just, again, we haven't had time to do that level of refinement on every single aspect of every single skill line and every single class.
Each class will be viable
in
solo play.
Yes. Yep.
Even if not every ability is.
Yep. Have you considered adding another row of skill lines to the characters? Currently, a single character can max out only 2 skills on the player mat or get 4 or 5 half-leveled skills. That is kind of we've considered just about everything at this point, but we're not planning on that. Again, the goal is to have basically a maxed out character going into the final dungeon or going into the final encounter. That is intentional, and that is to hopefully encourage you to try something different on your next play.
Correct.
And to really focus on like refining your character into a well-oiled Imperial or Argonian machine.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to like my Diablo 1 and 2 days of like just being able to level up Bone Spear, and it was low level skill, but being able to just lean into that and have that be a fairly viable build, at least almost up to the end. That kind of an idea of, you might, to fill out a line, you might end up finding that a really good build that's working for you is a bunch of level 1s from that skill line, not getting up to the level 4. So, we want there to be not just like try a different skill line, but like try different combinations of dice within a skill line, and all of that to make that possible and not give you like the ability to have all of that in every game. It required us to kind of keep that limiter on the amount of slots.
Right.
So that creates a lot of interesting choices. Yes, they're restricting, but like that's what makes them interesting is like you have to pick and choose.
We are intentionally trying to force you into making some hard decisions about how you build your character. And again, what we generally find is that then when you're done with that play or you're done with that campaign, your instinct is like, oh, I want to try again. I want to try something different this time. I want to if I would have done it this way, that might have worked better. Or that's the fun. I mean, there's an entire game called Role Player that a lot of people play, and it's all about just the character creation process. Like you don't do anything with that character unless you get expansions. That's a huge part of the fun here. Is we hope everybody feels inspired not to just play a stealth archer Khajiit every time. Like try something different every time because there's so much in here and all of it is so interesting that again, I'm the opposite of a min-maxer. I try to create the jankiest, dumbest character possible and see if I can succeed with them. That's what interests me and makes me excited to play and come back for more. So anyway, does armor deplete? If so, is it based on number of turns or number of attacks? How is it tracked? Again, still playing with armor to a degree, both in terms of its strength, its stat number, and exactly. It started as just always on, like just period, just always on. That was also part of what made it too strong. Right now, once you chew through it in a single turn, it's gone for that turn. But then it's back at the beginning of the next subsequent turn. Mm-hmm. So, but again, that could still change as we balance the enemies and try to find that sweet spot of challenge and lastability.
And your own armor is in your active slots, and that just is a 1-to-1 or whatever. It does go away when it's used.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You can save it up in your active slots throughout multiple turns. So yes. Okay. Will there be any scope for a longer campaign style of play to build up character over more than 3 sessions? Not currently planned. Again, this is what this game is trying to do. We are trying to do a shorter 3-session campaign. Mm-hmm. If you want a much, much longer campaign where your character lasts forever, this probably is not the game for you. We talked about every iteration of what this campaign could look like. I mean, we talked about doing a 7th continent level map of Tamriel, right, where every region had a fixed card for every single hex on that board, and we talked about trying to do a 25 to 50 session A to Z campaign. This is what we land on because again we felt like what the systems we were working with worked best in this way, and we love giving you new stuff to unlock rapidly because we think that we find that super fun. And what we found is that our players, at least Too Many Bones are by far our best selling title. People love unlocking new dice to roll, and and if we to stretch that out over a really long campaign, we have to significantly scale back the things that we give you along the way, which makes every game session not feel quite as exciting, and we can't give you stuff nearly as fast. So this is what we've landed on because this is what feels the best.
Yeah, we originally when we talked, we were talking about how do we plug and play players in because of the fact that if you go beyond like that 1 to 3 session limit, you're not necessarily guaranteed to be able to have that steady group of the same 4 people showing up. And so how do we allow one person to kind of change out with another one, but still let them choose a different character, but not be under-leveled? But I mean, that's where we were talking about that for months before we kind of took a little bit different direction and just was like, no, what are we after? We want there to be great fulfillment in a single session achieved. Like we got to get there. And then kind of that extra after 3rd session of like a feeling of you've completed something. Beyond that, are there some quests, some stuff we could roll out and support stuff? Like we're always listening. So like if there's some kind of an achievement thing or some kind of cool thing that we roll out later that allows you to try to work through every region and check those boxes, and then it unlocks a big quest. Like we're always open to like April Fool's products and all sorts of things. So hey, there we go. Ta-da. Yeah. So yeah, like I mean, we are listening in that regard, but to be clear, that's not the main intent of this game, is to take it beyond 3 sessions. Yeah. Even though we know that it's based on building a character and having that character for a while.
Yep. There could be maybe a post-game quest system at some point where it's like you get one more challenge or something that's like really, really high level with your character or something like that. But multiple sessions, we're not going to try and shoehorn that into a system that's not built to do that. It's just not what this game is best at. So app for narration, a possibility or certainty? I would say it's a possibility. I did talk with Foreteller last week. And they gave us some numbers, and we're working through that, whether or not it's possible. I definitely would not promise it at this point, but we're looking at it and looking at what's potentially possible either now or in the future. So yeah, I think that is everything. So we just mentioned April Fool. So I did just want to mention this is not Elder Scrolls specific. we do have Aprilis and the Fool, a little mini expansion for April Fool's Day.
It's such a cute box.
It is a cute box, yeah. Available for Hoplomachus Victorum until the end of April, but it will also be available to purchase in the Pledge Manager for this campaign, though it will ship in a year and a half. So just wanted to mention that. We also have the Too Many Bones coffee promo pack from 2022, released in 2023. Didn't get here in time, but we have it now, so you can purchase that now until the end of April. This will also be available in the Elder Scrolls Pledge Manager. Just wanted to mention those two things again in case you were not aware or had forgotten or had not felt the appropriate amount of sales pressure from me personally. That's all for us. We have Salem and Andrew Chesney will be back in about 15 minutes to play session 2 of the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. I just want to say thank you to all of you who have watched. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for supporting this campaign or just even taking a look if you've decided not to support this campaign. We appreciate the fact that you cared enough to tune in and take a closer look at what we are cooking over here.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, so hang tight for 15 minutes. There will be more gameplay, and we will also be reposting both this and the live play. If you're not able to stick around for the live play, we will be reposting them on our channel later and including them in future updates, or in a future update, I should say. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you. See you in 15 minutes with some live playthrough.